After the release of Jurassic Park 3, the series took a break. Its response wasn't actually negative, but still rather mixed, with a slightly less positive reaction to what The Lost World garnered. This didn't stop fans from asking for further sequels, though. Remember, Spielberg bought the rights to 6 films back when the first was in production, so something had to come out eventually. In time, it even became commonplace for Jurassic Park fans to share their own scripts for Jurassic Park 4 that they'd written during this time of production hell. Finally, after 14 years of waiting, Colin Trevorrow's Jurassic World was released to the public in 2015. The film went on to gross over $1.6 billion at the box office and introduced an entire new generation to this dinosaur franchise. The response was positive for most of the audience, with a few very vocal detractors making it a point to call out everything they disliked about this newest film. Their biggest concerns were primarily rooted in how different this movie was to the first, mainly in relation to how it chose to tell its story. Nevertheless, the film was successful, and a new Jurassic trilogy was born. I saw Jurassic World in the theaters 5 times that year. I later went on to buy it on Blu-ray and watch it even more. After watching it as many times as I did, I often went back to the other films in the series to check and see how the whole franchise stacked up. And one of the major things I realized early on about Jurassic World when compared to Jurassic Park was just how different these two movies were. On a structural level and on a visual level, these films were quite unique to one another, and both did a really good job at being crowd pleasers for their respective releases. It took me a while to really pinpoint what Jurassic World was emulating that I'd seen before, because it most certainly wasn't the first Jurassic Park. When I finally found the movie I was looking for, it didn't honestly shock me that it was from another Spielberg classic. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indy and Marion have a short discussion on their past relationship that is told entirely through what most would identify as expository dialogue. Indy has come to get help from Marion in a similar way that Claire has come to get help from Owen. At certain points in both of these films, it even looks as if Trevorrow was directly influenced by this reunion of characters who had a shared past. And Owen, like Marion, initially instigates the problems the two faced in the past, much to their visitors' detest. Both are totally in control of their own lives, separate of one another as well, with Marion owning her own bar and Owen living in isolation within his bungalow. This difference in writing to the way Jurassic Park introduced Alan Grant and Ellie was interesting to me, and once you factor in the reality of this entry being a continuation of the first, it makes a lot of sense. Jurassic World was the hugely successful attempt to revitalize this franchise and remind adults what they loved about the original movie in the first place. This film did this by incorporating a lot of imagery and scenery that was shot to directly stimulate your experiences with the first entry in the series. It also did this by having a very self-aware air about itself. The creation of the Indominus Rex being the manifestation of sequels in Hollywood and how they can destroy a franchise. This corporately produced genetic hybrid abomination goes on to absolutely trash Jurassic World and leave behind nothing but ruins in its wake. It took the combined efforts of the series mascot T-Rex and Velociraptor to bring this new monster down and, in a way, save the Jurassic Park franchise from something like the Spinosaurus, which is even alluded to through visual imagery. Another thing that I picked up on in this particular movie was the expansion of the discussion that was made in the first Jurassic Park. Now that genetic power has been used and incorporated into a working theme park, what exactly are the ramifications of such an event? What responsibility do people take for this sort of power? And the answer was pretty interesting. Some eventually go down the same path that Malcolm warned about in that first movie. They'd patented it, they packaged it, they slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and sold it to the masses. Others have chosen to proliferate this technology for other frontiers, specifically war. The discussion is no longer being played out in theory in these newer Jurassic World movies, and it has instead been actually explored in full in the details surrounding their plots. Can you imagine how redundant it would be if they had yet another scene in which all of the characters sat around and debated about what this technology could do to the world? Especially after the fact that Jurassic Park already happened in this very timeline, and those chaotic prophecies literally set the table for all of what was to come. If you made another Jurassic Park movie that attempted to jab the audience with ethical questions instead of actually exploring the ones you'd already asked, how do you think that would look on the big screen? Wouldn't that be the series running in circles and not really following through with what they'd promised? I think for me personally, this new film also meant a lot to someone who was heavily invested in Michael Crichton's book, which actually starts out with the reality of the animals already having escaped the island and beginning to stalk about on the mainland. In fact, much of what was used in this fourth entry in the series was actually directly lifted from Jurassic Park and the Lost World in more ways than just set-piece action sequences. Control over nature is actually the big topic of discussion in this movie, and it's presented to the audience with Owen Grady and his pack of imprinted velociraptors. Many people forget the fact that the first movie was actually based on a book, and that sleight of mind is something that I think needs to be changed. Unlike Jurassic Park 3, Jurassic World actually had a legitimate human antagonist and even offered a large climax that revolved heavily around all of the meta themes of corporately produced sequels and their destructive behavior to a franchise. It also followed through with something the original Jurassic Park did by focusing on the usage of Velociraptor heavily throughout the earlier moments in the film, just before they were set loose because of Hoskins' constant attempts to control nature. In Jurassic Park, the raptors get released only when they reboot the system, which kind of kicks off that movie's climax with the kitchen sequence, something you could directly see continued in the future with Jurassic World's raptor betrayal scene. But instead of pulling his structure directly from that first movie, Trevorrow also looks as if he'd taken cues from Raiders of the Lost Ark once again. Compare the truck chase sequence with that of Claire's escape from the raptors. The same character roles are even in play here, with Claire taking on the role that Indy had in that film. It's around this latter portion of the movie wherein we see Claire reject the importance of her career and actually begin to care for her family, Zach and Gray, and romantic interest, Owen Grady. One of the biggest things Trevorrow talked about wanting to do with these newer Jurassic World movies was create what he called Amblin films. Amblin, for those that don't know, is the company Spielberg made several iconic movies in. All of the Indiana Jones films, every JP movie, the Back to the Future trilogy, and others were all produced under that moniker, and they all incorporate a similar design. Movies made for kids but watched by adults. While it is technically true that the movie is structured differently to that of the first, I think it would be dishonest to immediately cast negative judgment on this failure to replicate the first film's design while ignoring the fact that it does so intentionally, and happens to follow a lot of the same story beats from a movie like Raiders. Compare all of this with the movie's accomplishment in building a working park that expanded upon what was set up in the first film, and happened to succeed in gaining an audience that positively enjoyed their trip back to Isla Nublar, and I'd say that the film's structure and thematic elements did just what they set out to do, and that's make a competent movie that welcomed an audience back to a world that had been abandoned 14 years ago. You see, the choice to avoid Jurassic Park's character models like paleontologist Alan Grant and paleobotanist Ellie Sattler was done to primarily relate the audience to new characters Owen Grady and Claire Dearing, both of which are people who are familiar with a Jurassic Park just like we are and know just what's in store for their jobs on the island. This self-aware pulp was added in an attempt to not retrace the series' steps and become honest with every viewer in attendance. We know the dangers of genetic power. We know Ian Malcolm was right, and we know that this series has stumbled before in the past. So why does this film deserve to exist? And the movie actually ponders that question itself in a lot of different ways, the most blatant of which happens to be the creation of the Indominus Rex itself. And the answer as to why it should exist happened to be reliant on the audience's reactions, which proved to be quite positive. To quote the film itself, "Don't forget why we built this place, Claire. Jurassic World exists to show how very small we are, how new. You can't put a price on that." And this is something that I think speaks a lot to the difference between audience and critical opinion in film, especially in its modern state. Take previous Amblin movies that get praised eternally and are rarely given any sense of criticism. For example, I want you to consider the critique some gave Jurassic World for having Owen's character written as an action hero archetype. No, he doesn't go through any development in that movie, and yes, the villain is quite one-dimensional in his presentation, quite similar to a popular whip-cracking adventure series. Can you honestly tell me what Indiana Jones's carried over development is from movie to movie? Does he not start off each film with an unsuperstitious mindset before ending on the, "Ah yes, I understand its power now"? Why should you penalize Jurassic World for this while not complaining about Indiana Jones? Is it because this is a Jurassic Park movie? Well, as stated earlier, Jurassic World isn't trying to be Jurassic Park. It's trying to be something different while still replicating the experience that you once had while watching Jurassic Park. While some would say that first movie should be left at its own singular experience, I would like to interject that if this was 100% true, then there wouldn't have been a shot of mud covering Nedry's Barbasol can, as well as a direct quote from Spielberg stating that the reason he left that there was for the purpose of making a new story. This story would eventually turn out to be Jurassic Park the game, but nevertheless, promised sequels still happened. Even the banner falling down at the end of the original Jurassic Park that declared "When dinosaurs ruled the earth" and the lunch debate scene were all reliant on the fact that this power could not be controlled and would break free. Life will find a way. With clever metaphors about man versus nature, the state of this very franchise, and beautiful set design complete with a stunning construction of Main Street, I honestly think Jurassic World is an accomplishment. Audiences saw the development of Claire Dearing evolve from that of busy workaholic into caring human being after the safety of her blood family was put into question, and the character of Owen Grady was used as a link to man and nature itself. The film explored the concept of Jurassic Park and turned it into a functioning new adventure. It may not be structured or presented the same way the first movie was, but that's kinda the point. I'd honestly have to give Jurassic World an A. As always, I know that everyone has their own ranking of these films, and some may feel differently to the way I do, and that's honestly okay. Like I've said before in the past, every opinion should matter here, and I think Jurassic World is actually a movie that invites discussion on this very topic. And it's something that I am honestly interested in hearing your feedback on. Whether or not you liked the direction Jurassic World took, I think should be completely held separate to how good you think the movie is, though. And that's something that I am very interested in seeing discussion about. Now, before I go, I want to thank all of my game wardens, as well as all of my InGen executives. I'd also like to thank all of my park workers and InGen hunters as well. It means the world to me that all of you guys enjoy what I do so much, and I seriously am eternally grateful for every ounce of support that you've shown me. I could never say thank you enough. Now, I'd like to thank you all for watching this video, and hope that you all enjoyed today's content. If you feel like I deserve it, I'd appreciate the like and hope that you'll consider subscribing if you're interested in hearing from me again. I'll see you all in the next video, guys. And as always, take it easy.